everyone. You're watching this video now because we've asked you to learn how to adjust insulin and you're taking insulin Ryzodeg. So this video applies to anyone who's on this particular insulin, Ryzodeg Asp, and the brand name is Ryzodeg. So if you're taking a different insulin and you're not sure if this is the video to watch, sit with us and based on what you're taking, we can teach you how to adjust the insulin once you get back home. Now, why do we adjust insulin? Because just taking insulin is not enough to control the blood sugars. We need to adjust the dose, increase the dose when the sugars are high, reduce the dose when the sugars are low, and this helps us keep our blood sugars in the target range. So this particular insulin Ryzodeg, some of you may be taking it before breakfast once a day, some of you are taking it before dinner once a day, some of you may even be taking it twice a day, in the morning and in the night. And irrespective of how you're taking it, we'll go through all the different scenarios in this video and teach you how to adjust the insulin once you get back home. If you still have questions, at the end of this video, sit with us one-on-one and we'll be happy to explain all this all over again to you. This video does not apply to those who are pregnant or anyone who wants to plan pregnancy. So if you are in that particular category of individuals, sit with us and we will discuss what is needed for you separately. So let's get started and let the classes begin.
So we're now going to see how to titrate insulin Ryzodeg. So if you're still not sure if this video applies to you or not, go back and check your prescription. Now the brand name of the insulin that we're talking about is Ryzodeg. So if you're taking this insulin, you can watch this video and learn how to adjust insulin. Now, Ryzodeg is a co-formulation insulin. So what do we mean by that? It has two parts. It has two different insulins mixed together in one injection. So 30% of it is a fast-acting insulin, which is called aspart, and 70% is a very long-acting insulin called Ryzodeg. So before we look at how to adjust the insulin dose, let's actually learn when we need to inject this particular insulin. Now, what I will tell you is this may vary depending on your reports. So stick to what your doctor has asked you to do and follow your prescription. If you've been asked to take it twice a day, it will be 15 minutes before breakfast and 15 minutes before dinner. But if the doctor has prescribed it just once a day, they would have also told you when you need to take it. Usually it is given before the largest meal. So this may be before breakfast or before dinner. And very rarely, sometimes in few individuals, it may be before lunch. So follow the prescription and that should tell you when you need to take it. So the timing of injection, that's the same, irrespective of whether you're taking it once or twice a day. So 15 minutes before food. So let's look at once daily Ryzodeg, and then we'll go on after some time to look at 2 times. So if you're only taking the injection once a day, this part is relevant to you. So how does insulin Ryzodeg work? Let's say you take 1 injection before breakfast, so 15 minutes before breakfast. 30% is a fast-acting insulin, so it starts to go up and it controls your sugars after breakfast, and then it starts to finish its work by about lunchtime. What about the rest of it? The rest of the 70% is a very long-acting insulin. We call this basal insulin. This works through the rest of the day and it controls your fasting blood sugar. Now, irrespective of whether you're taking it before breakfast or before dinner, you can use the same principles to adjust the insulin dose, and we will explain this to you again. If you're taking the insulin before dinner, if your doctor has said take it before dinner, you don't need to take it before breakfast, you again take the injection 15 minutes before dinner, and even then, there's a small part of it, 30%, which works fast and controls your sugars after dinner. And then the rest of the 70% is a long-acting insulin, which works through the day and it controls your fasting blood sugar. So which sugars should you check to adjust insulin Ryzodeg? What we want you to check is your fasting blood sugar. So irrespective of whether your injection is in the morning or in the night, use the same principles to adjust insulin. So check your fasting blood sugar at least twice a week. We also want the sugars to be under control after all the meals. So we encourage you to check after breakfast, after lunch, after dinner, and once a week, even 3 o'clock. So check the sugars after the other meals once a week. Of course, at any point of time, if you have low sugar symptoms, we want you to check your blood sugars again. The dose adjustment of this particular insulin will be based on your fasting blood sugar. So what are the normal fasting blood sugar values? Anything between 71 and 120 is normal, above 120 is high, and less than or equal to 70 is low. So if your sugars are in the normal range, it means the amount of insulin you've taken is enough. If your sugars are more than 120, that means the amount of insulin you've taken is not sufficient for you. And if it is low, below 70, that means the amount of insulin you've taken is a little bit more for you. So let's see how to adjust the insulin dose. Now, what we want you to get to is this normal target range of 71 to 120. You've taken the injection in the morning, you've checked your sugars every 2 to 3 days, and you've recorded it. Let's say the first time you checked, your fasting blood sugar is normal, it's 80. So it's in the normal range. That means you don't change the insulin dose. The amount of insulin you've taken is sufficient for you. But when you check your sugars, if it's more than 120, let's say it's 130 or 140, 160, but anything more than 120, what it means is the amount of insulin you've taken is not enough. So what do? You add 2 units to the insulin dose. So if you've taken 10, the next day increase to 12. Or if you've taken 14, the next day increase to 16. You get the idea. On the other hand, if you have a low sugar, so anything below 70, that means your insulin dose is more for you. So you reduce the insulin from the current dose by 2 units. So if you've taken 16 units, 16 minus 2 reduced to 14. If you're taking 20 units, 20 minus 2 reduced to 18. Even if you're taking your insulin not before breakfast, before dinner, check your fasting blood sugar. Use the same rule of 2 to adjust insulin. So it's really simple. Check your sugars every 2 to 3 days and adjust the insulin dose based on your fasting blood sugar. So you can do this whether your insulin dose is the morning or even if your insulin dose is once a day in the night. So let's look at an example here. Now let's say we've started you on this particular insulin and we've asked you to take 14 units, 15 minutes before breakfast. So you start checking your sugars, and what you see after a few days, your fasting is 190. So where do we stand here? The fasting sugar is high, so we add 2 units to our current insulin dose. So 190 is high for us. So 14 plus 2, our new dose is going to be 16 units. So we check again, and our fasting blood sugar is 150. So this is still high, so we add 2 more units, so 16 plus 2. We increase our insulin dose to 18. We check again, fasting blood sugar, still not yet at target. So 140 is more for us. So 18 plus 2, we increase the insulin dose to 20 units. We check again, 2 days later, our fasting still not okay, 150. So what do? You add 2 more units. So 20 plus 2 becomes 22. We check again the next day, and the fasting sugar is finally normal, so it's 100. So this is where we want to be. So when the sugars are normal, what do? Don't change the insulin dose. So don't add, don't subtract anything. Continue the same dose as it is. So 22, you continue to take 22 again. You check your sugar after another 2 days. Your fasting is still very good. It's 80. But what has happened? Suddenly in the afternoon, you start to feel a little tired, hungry, sweaty. So you check your sugars and it is 65. So when you have a low sugar, correct the low sugar, have 2-3 spoons of glucose and then have a snack. Reconfirm that your sugars are normal after 15 minutes. But what do you do to the insulin dose? Low sugar, not just fasting, but at any point of time when you have a low sugar, reduce your insulin dose by 2 units. So you've taken 22 units already in the morning. Evening, you have a low, correct the low. But the next day, instead of 22, what you want to take is 20 units. Reduce the dose by 2 units. Don't go back to your starting dose of 16, because if you drastically reduce your insulin dose, then your sugars go up again. So whatever your current dose is, when you have a hypo, reduce from that by 2 units. We check the sugar again. Our fasting sugar is 90, which is normal. So we're happy with 20 units. It's sufficient for us for now, so we continue that. So even after you reach your target, until then, you keep increasing your insulin dose by 2 units. But even after you reach your target, there's going to be some amount of day-to-day variation in your blood sugars based on your diet, exercise, stress, sleep, so on. So we still want you to continue to check your sugars every 2 to 3 days and adjust the insulin based on fasting blood sugar. And this is, of course, for insulin Ryzodeg when you take it once a day. Now, what happens if you're actually taking it twice a day? The dose adjustment is slightly different. So if you're taking it once a day, you can move over to the end of the video. We're going to be giving you a few additional pointers at the end. But if you're taking insulin Ryzodeg twice a day, now is the time to pay attention. So you've been asked to take the injection 15 minutes before breakfast and 15 minutes before dinner, so 2 times every single day. So what does this insulin do? When you take the injection before breakfast, 30% works really fast, controls your PPBS. When you take the injection before dinner, again 30% is working really fast, controls your sugar after dinner. The rest of the 70%, both the times, is working through the day to control the sugars overall. And what we check really is the fasting blood sugar, so the early morning blood sugar, to make sure that you're under control. And then we check the sugar after breakfast here, so the postprandial sugar, to make sure you're under control. So this is slightly different from premixed insulin because Ryzodeg actually has a basal insulin. And this provides a 24-hour blood sugar control. So when should you check your sugars? We want you to check your fasting blood sugar and your postprandial blood sugar at least twice a week. If you check even more, better for you, because the more you adjust insulin, the more you're in range, the greater it is, the better it is for your health. We also want you to check after lunch here and after dinner here, early morning, 2 or 3 a.m. once a week. But predominantly, or basically, the dose adjustment when you take the insulin twice a day is going to be based on your fasting and your after breakfast blood sugar, that is 1.5 hours after your breakfast. Of course, at any point of time when you have low sugar symptoms, we want you to check your sugars at that point of time. So when you've taken the injection in the morning, we want to know if your PPBS is under control or not. So if your PPBS is not under control, we adjust the morning insulin. You also take the injection in the night again. So this long-acting insulin controls your fasting sugar. So if your fasting sugar is not under control, we adjust the night dose of insulin. So let's look at this in greater detail. But before that, what are our normal blood sugar values? So let's look at that first. So we want our fasting blood sugar to be between 71 and 120. And 1.5 hours after breakfast, we want it to be between 71 and 180. A fasting more than 120 is high, and a PPBS more than 180 is high. Of course, sugar below or equal to 70, whether it's fasting or PPBS or any other time of the day, is a low sugar. So how do we adjust insulin Ryzodeg when we're taking it twice a day? So to control the fasting blood sugar over here, what we want you to do is adjust the night dose of insulin. So if your fasting is under control, it means the amount of insulin you've taken in the night is sufficient for you. If your fasting is high, then the night insulin is not enough, so we increase the night insulin dose. If your fasting blood sugar is low, that means the amount of insulin you've taken in the night is a little too much for you, so we reduce the night insulin dose. So in order to control the fasting blood sugar, what we do is adjust the night insulin. What about the sugars after breakfast? In order to control the sugars after breakfast, we actually adjust the morning insulin dose. So if your PPBS is under control, under 180, that means the amount of injection you've taken, insulin you've taken in the morning is sufficient for you. You've met the required dose. If your PPBS is high, more than 180, that means the amount of insulin you've taken is not enough for you, so we increase the dose. If you have a low sugar here after breakfast or at any time, even before lunch or evening, that means the amount of insulin you've taken in the morning is a little more for you. So we reduce the dose of the morning insulin. So let's look at some examples with some numbers. So as I mentioned earlier again, so in order to control the fasting blood sugar, we adjust the night insulin dose. So if your fasting is normal, between 71 and 120, don't change the insulin dose in the night, continue the same dose. If your fasting is more than 120, add 2 units to your night dose of insulin. If your fasting is below 70, reduce your night insulin by 2 units. Or even if you have a low sugar in the night after dinner and before your breakfast, reduce your night insulin by 2 units. What do we do to control the post-breakfast sugar or the PPBS? We adjust the morning insulin dose. So if your PPBS is normal, under 180 and above 70, then don't change the dose. If you've taken 15 units, continue 15 units. Because the amount of insulin you've taken is sufficient to control the post-breakfast blood sugar. If your PPBS is high, add 2 units to your insulin dose. So let's say you've taken 15 units, PPBS is high, more than 180. You've already taken insulin that day. So the next day morning, add 2 units to the insulin dose. 15 becomes 17. If you have a low sugar after breakfast, so PPBS is below 70, or even before lunch, evening, then the next day, reduce your morning insulin by 2 units. So if you've taken 15 units, don't reduce by half. Reduce 15 minus 2 to 13 so that the low sugar doesn't repeat again. So let's again look at low sugar in detail. So at any time during the morning 12 hours, the daytime, after your breakfast and before your dinner, if you have a low sugar, reduce your morning insulin by 2 units. In the night, if you have a low sugar, that is after dinner and up to the next day morning breakfast, the night 12 hours, if there's a low, reduce your night insulin by 2 units. It's very, very simple. Of course, when you have a low, we want you to correct the low, have glucose and recheck after 15 minutes to make sure that you've corrected the low sugar. So let's take examples and then try to understand how to adjust insulin with real numbers. So you've been started on insulin Ryzodeg now. We've asked you to take 15 units before breakfast and 10 units before dinner. So let's see what happens when we start adjusting the insulin at home. So we check the sugars. Our fasting is 160, PPBS is 210. So both are high. Because the sugars are high, we add 2 units. Since the fasting is high, what we do is we add 2 units to the night insulin dose. So the 10 becomes 12. And because the PPBS is high, we add 2 units to the morning insulin dose. So instead of 15, 15 plus 2, the new insulin dose is 17. So when we check again, our fasting is slightly better, 130, and after breakfast is 190, but still not enough. So what do? We add 2 more units. Fasting sugar is high, so we increase the night dose. 12 plus 2 becomes 14. After breakfast sugar is high, so we increase the morning dose. 17 plus 2 becomes 19. We check the sugar again after another 2 days. Our fasting is 100, so this is normal. So what do? A normal fasting value, we don't change the night dose because this is normal. So we continue 14 units in the night. After breakfast, however, it's still a little bit more, 188. So this is still high for us. So we add 2 units. So in order to control the postprandial sugars, we adjust the morning insulin. So 19 plus 2, this becomes 21. So we check the sugar again. What has happened is we've had a low sugar early in the mornings. The fasting now is 65. So if you have a low sugar early morning or at any point of time in the night, we want you to reduce your night insulin by 2 units. So 14, we reduce it, minus 2, this becomes 12. Of course, we correct the hypoglycemia at that point of time. The sugars after breakfast are 170. So 170 is in the normal range. So if your PPBS is under control, that means the amount of insulin you've taken in the morning is enough for you. So don't change 21, keep it as it is. So your new dose is 21 and 12. You check again after another 2 days. Your fasting is 104, ppbs is 160. So what do you do here? Well, your sugars are in the normal range, so don't make any changes. Continue the same dose of insulin. So we want you all to do the same once you get back home. Of course, we also want you to check your sugars after lunch and after dinner, early morning, once a week as well, and maintain a chart and adjust insulin. So you'll start to see that gradually, as your insulin dose goes up, you will reach your normal blood sugar target. Once you reach your normal blood sugar target, then continue the same dose of insulin. But even after you reach your normal target, you may have small variations in your day-to-day insulin dose. This is because the blood sugars constantly change in all of us. Don't hesitate to increase the insulin dose because there is really nothing called a maximum dose of insulin. The amount of insulin that keeps your blood sugar in the normal range is your insulin dose. So until you reach your target, keep increasing the dose. Everyone requires a different dose of insulin. So let's not go home, look at our prescription, or as we adjust the dose, say that we've reached 30 units, start to wonder how much higher can I go? My neighbor takes 10 units, my friend in the park takes 15 units. There might be someone else requiring even 50 to 100 units of insulin per day. So everyone's dose is entirely different. So the dose that corrects your blood sugar is the right dose for you. So insulin is safe for you. Even as the dose goes up, there's no problem for your heart or your kidney. So don't worry. So if you have a low sugar, then that means that dose is a little bit more for you. Then take one step back and reduce your insulin dose by 2 units. Individual blood sugar targets may slightly vary. So though we've said fasting under 120, post-breakfast under 180, for some of you who are younger, they may want the sugars to be stricter, fasting under 100, and even post-breakfast under 140. For those planning pregnancy, or for those of you who are pregnant, the targets are entirely different. We're actually much more stricter. So if you are pregnant, sit with us separately. This video does not apply to you. If you're much older, or if you have some other complications, problems in the heart, kidney, liver, your targets are going to be slightly relaxed. So sit with us individually to learn what your exact targets are, but you can use the same principles that we've explained here to adjust insulin once you get back home. Insulin dosage adjustment is an important part of diabetes management. Just taking insulin doesn't get your sugars down because only taking the right amount of insulin and reaching your targets keeps you healthy. So let's all start adjusting insulin today.